Welcome. Welcome, everyone. I am going to do our introductory remarks and housekeeping, and then we will toss this over to Mr. Gay and Dr. Pereboom. Welcome. I'm Lindsay Baker, Executive Director of Maryland Humanities. We have some housekeeping items to take care of first. It's 2021, and we know everyone is a little bit tired of Zoom, but we're going to go over some stuff quickly. We want to let you know this event is being recorded for further viewing purposes. You will be able to view this event on the Maryland Humanities YouTube channel after the author tour is complete. If you have a question for Ross Gay, use the Q&A function, which is located at the bottom of your screen. Please do not use the chat to ask questions, although you can use the chat to chat. With the Q&A function, you are able to view the questions that other attendees have asked. If you want to ask a question someone else has already put in the Q&A, click the thumbs up under it to upvote that question. This will let the moderator know which questions are of the most interest to the audience during Q&A later in the program. Thankfully, we have an ASL interpreter with us today, and captions are enabled. You should see the captions at the bottom of the screen. If you find them distracting, click the button that says CC and you can turn them off. Now let's get started. We're excited you could join us this afternoon. This event is more than one of 300 programs being held this fall as part of our One Maryland, One Book program, which we like to think of as Maryland's biggest book club. Since the beginning of One Maryland, One Book 14 years ago, the authors of our selected books have spoken at various locations across the state. That was not possible this year given the ongoing pandemic and our wish to err on the side of caution by not holding large indoor events at this time. We're proud to be able to bring the One Maryland, One Book author tour to you virtually, so we can all still gather to hear Ross Gay speak. The level of enthusiasm for his collection of lyrical essays, The Book of Delights, highlights our collective interest in coming together during challenging times with the hope of connecting through our shared experiences. High school classes, book clubs, public libraries, senior centers, correctional facilities, and more have been participating in events inspired by the book across Maryland since September, and plan to join us for more discussions and events this month and into November. At Maryland Humanities, we're passionate about making the humanities a part of everyday life. Programs like this one use the humanities to explore our ideas, our stories, and our values, to foster understanding among people with different perspectives, and to strengthen our ability to interact meaningfully. I invite you to take a moment to learn more about our 9 other programs by visiting mdhumanities.org. And of course, the executive director is saying, if you enjoy your time with us this afternoon, I hope you will consider clicking on the donate button at the top of our website homepage when you visit. We're an educational nonprofit, and it's people like you and your generosity that allows us to thrive and continue to offer over 1,000 free programs statewide annually. And I want to take a brief moment to thank our co-hosts and partners, the Fulton School of Liberal Arts at Salisbury University. Additional support was provided by Salisbury University Bookstore, University of Maryland Eastern Shore, Wicomico Public Libraries, Wor-Wic Community College, and Worcester County Library. The staff of Salisbury University and their partners have put great effort into this afternoon's event. Special thanks to Chris Egan, who worked closely with our staff. And now I'd like to turn things over to Dr. Maarten Pereboom, Dean of the Fulton School of Liberal Arts at Salisbury University, to offer a few words and introduce our author. Maarten is also a board member here at Maryland Humanities. He earned his PhD at Yale University, where he studied the history of 20th century international relations. In 2017, he participated in the Fulbright Nehru International Education Administrator Seminar in India. In 2018, he received the Salisbury University President's Diversity Award. And maybe more importantly, I don't know if Maarten would agree, he is our outgoing chair of our grants committee at Maryland Humanities, and he is a wonderful board member. Over to you, Maarten.
Thanks, Lindsay. It's good to be with you all this afternoon here on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, kicking off the author tour, our virtual author tour on the eastern end of the state. So it's my great pleasure to introduce our author today. Ross Gay is the author of The Book of Delights, a genre-defying book of essays, and 4 books of poetry, including his most recent, Beholding, a love song to legendary basketball player Julius Erving, aka Dr. J, who dominated courts in the 1970s and 1980s as a small forward for the Philadelphia 76ers. Gay is a founding editor with Carissa Chen and Patrick Rosal of the online sports magazine Some Call It Ballin', a founding board member of the Bloomington County Orchard, a nonprofit free fruit for all food justice and joy project. Gay has received fellowships from Cave Canem, the Red Loaf Wit Writers Conference, and the Guggenheim Foundation. He teaches at Indiana University. In the Book of Delights, Gay offers up a volume of lyric essays written over one tumultuous year. The first nonfiction book from the award-winning poet is a record of the small joys we often overlook in our busy lives. Among Gay's funny, poetic, philosophical delights are friends' unabashed use of air quotes, cradling a tomato seedling aboard an airplane, the silent nod of acknowledgement between the only two Black people in a room. But Gay never dismisses the complexities, even the terrors, of living in America as a Black man, or the ecological and psychic violence of our consumer culture, or the loss of those he loves. More than any other subject, though, Gay celebrates the beauty of the natural world, his garden, the flowers peeking out of the sidewalk, the hypnotic movements of a praying mantis. So it's my great pleasure to welcome and ask you to join me in welcoming in your hearts, if not through applause, Ross Gay.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much. And so glad to be here. And I feel really grateful and lucky that I get to share this work with you all. And it's moving to me that, like, you know, it's always moving to me when I know that people are reading the work. So I just want to say that first. So yeah, thank you, and glad to be thinking with you. I'm going to read for about 20 minutes, and I'm going to, you know, maybe 6 or so essays. And this first one, so let me just tell you again, for those of you, most of you know the book, but for anyone who doesn't, the premise of the book is basically that one day I was having a really wonderful day, and I had a moment of delight, and I thought, oh, I should write a little essay about this moment of delight. And then a bird kind of flew into my head, and I said, and the bird said, no, do it every day for a year. So that's what this book is. And it's 102 of those entries. This first one is called The High Five from Strangers, etc. Today, I was wandering the square of the small Indiana town where I gave a poetry reading at the local college. A feature of the small town Midwest, a city hallish building in the center, always with some sad statue trumpeting one war or another. This one had a guy in one of those not very protective looking hats they called a helmet during World War I. He's carrying, naturally, a gun. Jenna Osman's book, Public Figures, alerted me to the ubiquity of the gun, the weapon, in the hands of our statues. A delight I wish to now imagine and even impose, given that beneficent dictatorship of one's own life anyway, is a delight. All new statues must have in their hands flowers, or shovels, or babies, or seedlings, or chinchillas. We could go on like this for a while, but never again, never ever guns. I decree it, and I also decree the removal of the already extant guns. Let the emptiness our war heroes carry be the metaphor for a while. As I was finishing circling the square, I passed a storefront garage with huge Make America Great Again signs. It was a foreign auto repair shop, and inside were mostly Toyotas and Hondas. I took my notebooks out in the coffee shop, and I was reading over these delights, transcribing them onto my computer. And while I was working, headphones on, swaying to the new De La Soul record, Delight, which deserves its own entry, I noticed a white girl. She looked 15, but could have been, I guess, a college student, standing next to me with her hand raised. I looked up, confused, and pulled my headphones back, and she said, like a coach or something, "Working on your paper? Good job to you, high five." And you better believe I high-fived that child in her pre-ripped Def Leppard shirt and her itty-bitty Doc Martens. For I delight in unequivocally pleasant public physical interactions with strangers. What constitutes pleasant, it's no secret, is informed by my large-ish male and cisgender body. A body that is also large-ish, male, cisgender, and not white. In other words, the pleasant, the delightful are not universal. We should all understand this by now. A few months ago, walking down the street in Umbertide, a trash truck pulled up beside me, and the guy in the passenger seat yelled something I didn't understand. I said, "Como?" The Spanish word for come again, which is a ridiculous thing to say because even if he had come again, I would not have understood him. He knew this, and hopping out of the truck to dump in a couple cans, he flexed his muscles, pointed at me, and smacked my biceps hard. Twice. I loved him. Or when a waitress puts her hand on my shoulder, forget if she calls me honey, baby, even better. Or someone scooting by puts their hand on my back. The handshake, the hug, I love them both. Once I was getting on a plane and shuffling down the aisle, I saw, sitting at the front of coach, reading a magazine, my great Uncle Earl. I got down on my knees and put my hand on his forearm. I said, "Uncle Earl, it's me, Ross." He looked at me kind of quizzically, as did the woman traveling with him, who did not look one bit like my Aunt Sylvia, which made me look back at my not Uncle Earl, who looked maybe like my Uncle Earl's second cousin 20 years ago. And though it was benign and no one was hurt, it was a little weird, and they looked confused. All the same, given his Uncle Earl died about 6 months later, I'm delighted I got to see him and touch him gently, lovingly, about 1,000 miles away. This next one is called nicknames. Nicknames. And what I should say before we get into this one is that I talk about something called letterpress, just very briefly, but it's letterpress is an old style of printing. So old newspapers used to be printed on a thing, you can imagine, kind of a crank thing. And I say a Chandler and Price letterpress, which I'm actually in a little studio here that has another kind of letterpress. But just so you know, that these notebooks are printed on an old-timey kind of machine. Nicknames. I'm writing in a notebook with the words, "Pay attention," on the front, which is a cousin to another notebook in my bag with the words, "Pay attention, motherfucker," on it, printed on a Chandler and Price letterpress that I co-own with my friend, which I have yet to see, for it is lodged in a print shop in Lubbock, Texas. My beloved co-owner pal, which makes him a kind of spouse, I suppose, who gifted me these delightful notebooks, is named Boogie, or Boogs, and was so named by me, one of my greatest literary achievements. Boogie, or Boogs, might not be the first name you'd assign to Boogie, or Boogs, for a number of reasons, perhaps the most significant of which is that he has definitely not spent a lot of time dancing, boogieing, which you might ascertain from his appearance, which would be a wrong thing to do, though you would be right. This is one of the reasons Boogie, or Boogs, is such a great nickname. It's a kind of curveball that has, with much repetition, become utterly natural. And his Christian name, his government name, Curtis, has become kind of awkward and clunky, kind of Lutheran, kind of curt. It's a clothesline of a name, really, the football kind. Another reason I love this nickname and have now come to love how much I love this nickname is because Boogie doesn't know that every time I say his name, I am also invoking the great and similarly nicknamed L. Boogie, or Lauryn Hill, whom I am guessing wrongly, probably rightly, Boogie has never boogied to. Boogie calls me salpicon, which he tells me means sizzle, which I think fits. Though it would be a safe assumption, given my own delight, that the nickname Salpicon might afford Boogie some similarly pleasurable ironic association, which I do not need to know about. I've shortened my nickname to Picon, whatever that means. Anyway, look, I love nicknames. They delight me. There are evidently people from whom nicknames are repelled like projectiles from Luke Cage's skin, fried eggs to Teflon. My friend Patrick is one of them. Though the simple Spanishification of his name, Patricio, time to time, among some of us, is one that has endured, sort of, time to time. Drop the pa, jiggle the spelling, and it might be a good sticky name, Tricio, one that in a generation or two might become associated incorrectly and beautifully, and so correctly, with something arboreal, something to do with trees. How delightful is that? I am a bit of a nickname magnet and have been assigned the following aliases: Bizquick, Biz, Raheem, the compassionate, Beef, Beefy, Big Man, Biggs, Biggie, Big Lil Big, Big Papa, the Big Gay, Bones, Baby Boy, Baby Gay, the Baby, Booger, Beast, Sammy, Saucy, Saucy Sauce, Saucy Pants, Dr. Sauce, Dr. Hot Sauce, Doc, the Doctor, Tall Lady, Tall Drink, Wave, Arroz con Pollo, Ross the Boss, the King of Applesauce, Roski, Snozzer, Six, Sace, Unky, Daddy, and things too lewd or private to share. I don't know exactly what nicknames mean, though a quick reading of mine and the abundance of the B sound, that babiest of sounds, makes me think it might be primal. I know that I rarely call the people I love by their names. I call them, if it's okay with them, by the name I have given them. I wonder if this means I think of my beloveds as my children. That seems very patronizing, especially because I mostly don't give them money. But on the other hand, how lovely are my mothers, all my babies. This one is called The Sanctity of Trains. The Sanctity of Trains. Something I've noticed riding on Amtrak trains, like the one I'm on right now, between Syracuse and Manhattan, is that people leave their bags unattended for extended periods of time. Maybe they go to the end of the car to use the bathroom, or sometimes they go to the far end of the train to the cafe, which smells vomity like microwave cheese. My neighbor on this train, across the aisle and one row up, disappeared for a good 20 minutes, her bag wide open, a computer peeking out, not that I was checking. She is not unusual in this flaunting of security, otherwise known as trust, on the train. Nearly everyone participates in this practice of trust, and without recruiting a neighbor across the aisle to keep an eye on my stuff while I use the restroom, which seems to be a coffee shop phenomenon. Trusting one's coffee shop neighbor, but not the people in line, etc. I suppose, given the snugness of a train, especially if it's full, one might speculate there's a kind of eyes on the streetness at play. Although it seemed to me this morning, when I was first leaving my valuables on my seat for pilfering, my laptop and cell phone glittering atop my sweatshirt and scarf, most everyone was sleeping, and so provided little, if any, eyewitness deterrent. I suppose I could spend time theorizing how it is that people are not bad to each other, but that's really not the point. The point is that in almost every instance of our lives, our social lives, we are, if we pay attention, in the midst of an almost constant, if subtle, caretaking, holding open doors, offering elbows at crosswalks, letting someone else go first, helping with the heavy bags, reaching what's too high or what's been dropped, pulling someone back to their feet, stopping at the car wreck, at the struck dog, the alternating merge, also known as the zipper. This caretaking is our default mode, and it's always a lie that convinces us to act or believe otherwise. Always. This one is called bird feeding. Today, I was walking through Washington Square Park, bundled up against, so I took the train, I got there. Now I'm in New York. Today, I was walking through Washington Square Park, bundled up against, thank God, a seasonably cold day for once. And after a brief conversation with the Dosa man, who told me to come back in an hour, I noticed a guy whose back faced me with a pigeon for a head. When I looked closer, a touch alarmed, I realized he actually just had a pigeon on his shoulder. Closer still, and I saw that the pigeon was whispering into his ear, not wobbling at all on the slick north face perch. And closer still, it's called gawking, yes, revealed simply this guy feeding the pigeon, the bird dropping its head into the man's hand so close that he must have been holding near his own face, so that the feeding was not only kind of romantic, but it alluded to that original feeding that the bird experienced, a mother dropping masticated victuals into the tiny chirper's gaped mouth, which is, after all, the first romance. It looked like so many things. I'm realizing this, writing this. In some way, the two looked to be dancing, slow dancing, swaying, turning almost imperceptible circles, oblivious to the handful of park dwellers in a semicircle of benches around them, enjoying the sun. God damn, I thought, walking through the giant arch on the Fifth Avenue. God damn, how often do you get to see someone slow dancing with a pigeon? And I kid you not 30 seconds later, walking toward 8th, giggling at my good fortune, a tufted titmouse swooped by my head, landing on a wrought iron gate, upon which a pedestrian walking past me immediately pulled from her snazzy jacket pocket a baggie of crumbs, and the bird hopped directly into her hand, nuzzling the goodies intermittent with tweeting toward its new pal, the bird and woman both nodding at me, gawking at them, smiling at my bafflement, as though to say, we're everywhere. This one is called, I think I'll read like two more. Yeah, maybe 2 or 3 more. It's called Babies, Seriously. Today, while I was reading on the airplane with my knees smashed into the seat in front of me, a toddler toddled down the aisle in her pink onesie with the panda head hood. She was a remarkably postured little creature, like so many of her ilk, and bold, toddling toward the back of the plane in front of her mother, who was doing a good job of letting the tot explore. But as the baby got near now, the man in front of me with his sleeping mask slid up on his forehead, widened his eyes, and smiled manically, making kissing noises at the baby. He spoke a language I didn't understand, but the sounds he was making to this baby, which with his traveling companions became a chorus of sounds, made me wonder if baby talk is a universal or universal-ish language. For I understood exactly what they were saying, and how nice of God to make this exception around the language adults speak to babies. Anyhow, the man was so enchanted with this petite creature with wisps of hair feathering north and big eyes that he couldn't resist first poking the child's tummy before scooping the squirt onto his knee, where she stood, bouncing and grinning, looking back to her mom, who looked a touch nervous, before being set free and retreating back down the aisle and returning again, upon which the choir of babbling would recommence, everyone reaching toward the munchkin. Picture the halftime show at a basketball game when the mascot bazookas t-shirts into the crowd, scooping her up and again, until I was so flabbergasted by the endurance of love and delight incited by this child, to whom I presume none of these people was related, a love and delight that seemed analogous to the one that makes some people struggle not to eat the faces of babies, that I found myself, despite the very engrossing book I was reading about something horrible, laughing out loud and babbling with them, and convinced again of something deeply good in us. And I'm gonna do two more. I'm gonna do two more. This is a real short one. This is called the Marfa Lights. Marfa is a town in Texas, and my buddy Pat and I were down there in 2017 for a residency where they put us up for like a month, which was amazing. So we would play basketball every day, or we would swing kettlebells and play basketball every day. The Marfa Lights. My buddy Pat and I went to shoot around at the courts here in Marfa today. We were warming up, shooting 12-footers or doing slow spin moves and crossovers, when a young guy from the other side of the court swaggered toward us, holding a ball on his hip, the light gleaming in his earrings. And he challenged us to a 2-on-2, pointing his thumb to himself and back to his buddy, draining threes from the corner. We agreed and went on to kick the shit out of them, 21-0. That is a horrible figure of speech, and I leave it in only to expose the violence we so easily say. We got more baskets than they did. That they were only 12 years old is irrelevant, given as this was their home court, and they even had a crowd watching. Another little girl who, when one of the kids shouted to the gods, "They're kicking our butts," said, "I hope so. They're grown men." And I'm going to do this last one. This is called cup licking, C-U-P-L-I-C-K-I-N-G, cup licking. Today I found myself, I adored that construction for its Whitmanian assertion of multitudinousness, licking the little remnants, little stains, from the coffee dribbling down the rim of the cup. More fastidious than lascivious, kind of cleaning the cup, like a raccoon. The first time I noticed someone doing this, it was my friend, my professor, Susan Blake. I was back at Lafayette College on a teaching fellowship, and we were meeting over lunch to talk about me co-teaching the Invisible Man unit. She got a warm up on her coffee as we were eating dessert, pumpkin pie, I think, and I noticed her lick the cup, unselfconsciously removing the dribble stains. I can't recall if she looked to see how thorough a job she did, though I usually do, and will touch up where I've missed. Nor do I call if she licked the cup more than once, though I assume she did, since I do, and she was my teacher in licking the cup. I think I wondered when she licked the cup, dragging her broad tongue against the porcelain, if she was flirting, if cup licking was a way middle-aged people communicate desire. Being a middle-aged person now, it's no surprise that I worry that any odd gesture might smuggle with it the possibility for misperception as flirting with beginning-aged people, some of whom I teach. And that, friends, is a losing battle. By which I mean to say, I don't think she was flirting. And if I lick the cup while in the presence of students, I do it surreptitiously, and never, God forbid, while making eye contact. When Professor Blake, which she forbade me from calling her and so made me a kind of adult, when Susan generously read the first 2 chapters of my dissertation, she asked me, without meaning to hurt my feelings, if I spent anywhere near as much time on my prose as I do my poems. When she handed the 60 or so pages back, all sliced up with red penned comments, she also handed me a handbook kind of book called Writing Prose, 9th edition, with the ugliest teal cover ever. How do we thank our dead teachers? Thank you. Thank you, Kara.
And thank you, Ross and Kara. I'll try to speak slowly and deliberately so you can do the signing. You're doing a great job. Thank you so much, Ross, for that. And having watched a couple of YouTube videos in preparation for this, I kind of saw how important it is to, or how valuable it is, and how wonderful it is to hear you read from your work. It's a very different experience from reading it, although reading it is very pleasurable in and of itself. So again, thank you so much, and it's great pleasure to engage you in a bit of conversation now, which I hope to kind of arrange around the idea of kind of public humanities and thinking about the disciplines from an academic side that the humanities embrace: philosophy, history, literature, with the work of creative writing. So I've learned over my years of experience on Maryland humanities that we sometimes need to be a little more transparent about what the humanities do. They really examine realms of human activity and the things that make us human. And I think this is a wonderful, wonderful text to kind of explore and demonstrate that. So again, thank you for this beautiful work. And I guess maybe I'll start with meaning and philosophy, since there is a lot here that maybe sort of defied expectations going into the book for a lot of readers. Because you think a book of delights is going to be sort of like Jack Handy's Deep Thoughts, right? Remember, right? From Saturday Night Live. But it's so much more than that, right? There was a lot about this that is delightful and that encourages us not to take ourselves too seriously all the time. And yet I think there's a really interesting connection between the awfulness that's out there and the importance of finding delight. And you talk about a delight muscle, and sort of conditioning those muscles. And you're an athletic guy, and so that resonates very strongly. I'd kind of pull it into the realm of the spiritual and even religious, maybe to some degree, in the idea that there's a discipline in a good sense, right? Discipline has lots of bad connotations as well. But maybe talk a little bit about how maybe through the process of writing this book, the concept of delight evolved and really sort of emerged as something that is really important for us to do in very troubled and difficult times.
Yeah, it's sort of, I realized, or, one of the things I think is really fun to note is that at the beginning of this, like I said, I wrote this basically daily entries. I didn't do it every day, but I was pretty damn close. And when I started, there was a little bit of like nervousness about, so it's also good to know for students and writers that I gave myself these constraints. It was to write by hand in a notebook, to write every day, and to write for 30 minutes. So these essays were all drafted in 30 minutes. So the idea was, among other things, was to make it a little bit easy. Like 30 minutes, okay, even like on a busy day, I could just, while I'm having a cup of coffee, do it a little delight. But still, one of the things that I was nervous about was that question of like, gosh, am I going to find something that delights me every day? And it took about 2 weeks to realize, oh, if I just have a little bit of time, I will be flooded with delights. Even on what feels like really difficult, sorrowful days. There will still be someone walking outside who laughs in a way that makes me think, for some reason, of a giraffe or something. It's going to happen. And that, I think, that as a kind of learning that coming to that understanding, which is also maybe a kind of trust or a kind of faith, was and is, it's moving and it's instructive. I think it's instructive because I think, among other things, one of the things that we know is that what we train our attention on tends to grow. And if it grows in our perception, it's growing, So it seems useful to sort of attend to train one's attention on all kinds of things, but among those things, what you love, what you love. And given as if it might then follow that if what you're training your attention on, you might also be likely to sort of, further into the world, what you love is even again a better thing to train your attention on, because, sharing what we love is profound. You said about the sort of spiritual or almost religious practice. You're exactly right. And I love that you troubled the word discipline, because I think I might say it in the intro, or I say it someplace else. But at first I was thinking of a discipline because I am like a sports guy. And one of the things that I do is like, as a writer, it's not always the best thing, but I'm very much inclined to like, do reps. I'm very inclined to like, just work it out, like just go and practice it out. And sometimes, I think we're learning this more now about sports too. Sometimes rest is really good. Sometimes like taking a 2-hour nap in the middle of the day is really good. So I decided that instead of the word in my head, instead of the word discipline, I'm more interested in the word practice, So a practice, which also has its kind of allusions or it's connected to also spiritual practice for sure. But the idea of a practice, not only in that way of saying something that you're doing all the time, but I'm alluding to people like Allen Iverson, talking about practice. I'm alluding to people who think hard and complexly about what constitutes practice. Things more than what we think of as practice tend to be practice too. I think that's sort of what I'm thinking. That's a great question.
Thank you. Yeah, and practice toward what? And that's kind of where we're going to come around to the theme for the whole program, which is hope, right? And so to get into the historical, I think what makes this book even more awesome as you think about it is that you wrote this book. Yeah, it appears, I'm a historian, so I'm kind of looking for the clues, from August 2016 to August 2017.
That's right.
And that was not a very delightful time, broadly speaking, right? And I noticed in one of your readings, the Tap Tap, there was a longer version of it. So I'm interested in the editing process, how things were maybe distilled or reduced, if you want to think of it in a culinary sense, through getting the book toward where it would be when you published it. But I'm also thinking about the history that was unfolding as you were making these observations and articulating these delights. In other words, a time, I think about presidential election campaigns as being a very stressful time. And that particular year, and I'll just sort of disclose, not only was it stressful in the fall, it was painful beyond that. I mean, again, just me personally, people have different experiences and different views. I get it. But how did those particular events and how did they maybe come into your initial writings and then get sort of edited as you work toward completing those reflections?
Yeah, it's a great question. I feel like, the sort of the time and the sort of dailiness of the project lets you see that I'm sort of contending as well with, what is going on in a kind of, current events way. But also, in terms of other histories that are sort of becoming available to me, so there's ways that the book throughout is sort of, the book is a very entangled book. The book is like, it's in its day, it's in its day. And I think probably the question of how to revise the book is really in terms of, because, we published a book in 2019. And one of the things that we were doing as we were revising the book, and I'm talking about my editor, Amy, and I, who was very helpful in helping me see like when I was being redundant, when I was sort of like, going over a thing that maybe, like I love redbud trees. And she was like, man, you really love redbud trees. So I couldn't have like 8 delights about redbud trees. I had to like pare it down to like 4 delights. So a lot of the revision process was actually making a manuscript, pulling delights. We got it down to about 145, maybe 150 that all felt pretty good. That made the book still, have a kind of like variety of curiosities, a variety of questions, probably a variety of sort of engagements with daily, sort of current event stuff, a variety of engagements with sort of, historical stuff. So that there was a kind of rhythm to the book that that maybe made each discrete essay both the best that it could be, like resonate or vibrate in a certain kind of way by itself, but also in concert with the other ones, as good as it could be. Which, when you have 102 pieces, you're always kind of like, I wonder, because I have all these essays that didn't make it into the book. And, and some of those essays are, because the dailiness of my life also would be being in a coffee shop and hearing someone playing, clearly like the barista would be playing, like have a, group I grew up with, New Edition, have like a New Edition station on. And but because I have like an essay about DeBarge and an essay about Donny Hathaway and an essay about Stevie Wonder and an essay about, it's like, all right, I think we're gonna have to leave the New Edition and the Luther Vandross and we're gonna have to leave those for some other project. So there was that kind of stuff too. I'm not exactly sure how, in retrospect, how this sort of, I guess there was a question actually, now that I'm thinking a little bit more, there was a question about how do we think about this book in terms of time? Like, because all of the essays are dated, and I say very specifically when the book was written, but we were also to some extent just curious about how does this book exist in time? And I guess that means how does this book exist, not just from August 1st to August 1st, 2016 to August 1st, 2017, but maybe for, a couple years more, Yeah.
Well, and I would say that if anything, the need for delight has only increased, and the importance of delight, since these things have only become more magnified since then. I mean, it's interesting. And of course, we've had the pandemic intervene, but if you think about racial injustice and George Floyd, that happened since then. And of course, we were having examples of the impacts of climate change since then, but that only seems to have intensified. And not only did we have the election in 2016, we had the election of 2020 and the attempt to overturn the results of that. So it just, again, to go to that dark place, the need for delight and the discipline of delight is only increased. But I'm interested as well, again, on a more experiential level, and very thankful to you for bringing out some delight in things that we find mortifying about our own experience. And anxiety dreams are one thing that, other people have this dream, you just can't get to the airport, or you're taking a class and you forgot to go to class, or you forgot to teach the class. I think the connectedness that we find in you sharing these things, but talk a little bit about those more uncomfortable aspects of the human experience that you've formulated as delights.
Yeah, like one of the things, it's so fun you asked that question, because I remember one time I read at a high school in New York, and I feel like I made this funny choice of saying, okay, so what do you want to hear? They had read the book. And they wanted to hear the ones that were going to be the most, horrible for me to read. And also another great thing is that one time I read, there's one toward the end of the book, it's called Cocoa Baby. And it's like, what I think of it, it's like adult stuff. It's just like, like our bodies are like, and when we get adult, like, yeah, of course, we have all this sort of embedded and, shames and everything else that we haul around. But it's like, yeah, I don't know. For me, I feel like, I'm 47. At the time, I don't know, I was 44, 45. It's changing, it's changing. And I forget sometimes what it is like to be 20. So anyway, I read this one, Delight, which has a lot of my body in it. Let's just put it like that. And I started reading, and where I start talking about my body in the essay, and I swear this is a huge reading to, like, I don't know, it's all these kids. It's like the Dodge Poetry Festival, and it's like, I don't know, there could have been 1,000 kids in this audience. There's a bunch of us. It's a high school day of the Dodge Poetry Festival. I read this essay, and I heard at one point when my body shows up in a certain way, they go, ooh. And then I have to just keep going. And I went a little further, and they're like, oh, that's too much. You can hear me like, that's too much. But anyway, but back to this high school that I visited, I have this essay where it's really funny to talk about them outside of the context, outside of the essay. I talk about peeing my pants in my car. A lot of people actually had that experience or something real close to it, and or worse. And I was telling these kids who were like 16 or 17 are all like mortified. And I was like, look, I'm doing this so when it happens to you, it's not going to be so bad. Look, they were not having it at all. They were like, no way. You are never going to happen to me. But anyway, I do actually feel like one, it's kind of fun to kind of get there a little bit, just to sort of, like the real things of our bodies not doing what we want them to do, which I think is actually, it's a child's experience. And then I feel like a little bit, for the most part, if we're lucky, our kind of middle youth, that kind of whatever, I feel like I'm like waving goodbye to it. It's like those 30 years or something, or 20 years or something, where it's like, you kind of, if you're lucky, you're not thinking about it, and then whether it's, for whatever reasons, then you start thinking your body becomes maybe differently interesting to you. Again, like, plenty of us are constantly thinking about our bodies because they are doing all kinds of things that we might rather they not be doing, or that they're just doing. But I think getting older, it's definitely, for me, it's a time of like encountering, oh, okay, like this is going to happen different now, or this isn't like when I was 21. And which is also to say, it's actually in a way witnessing my own sort of thinking about that this body will not be here eventually, and I feel like that's just, in a way, I feel like that's, it's an act of care for myself, but I also think of it as a kind of, care for the reader too,
I really appreciate that. And unfortunately, my Subaru has cloth seats, so.
Nice.
But yeah, and thinking also about memories, right? The things that keep coming back to us from now 50 years ago, that why am I still thinking about that? So again, I appreciate your connecting us in the sort of shared experience of being embarrassed and mortified and maybe just getting over it finally. But I guess I wanted to kind of come back, and we have just a couple more minutes to circle back to the theme of hope, and how in my experience of this, this was several books ago last week, and I reread the book this weekend. So grateful for that opportunity as well, and reflecting on the choice of this book as one that was a good text to embrace and explore the theme of hope. Can you talk a little bit about that and how delight? What do you see as the relationship between delight and hope?
That's a great question. It's fun. I've been kind of working on writing another book of delights, kind of, and because it's been 5 years since I wrote the first one, that one, and I've had enough time kind of away from that book, though I'm reading from it often and thinking about it and working on other stuff that maybe is tangentially related, that I've had kind of a good amount of time to keep considering what it is about delight, what delight is. And one of the things I sort of think is going on is that delight, it seems to me that one of the qualities of delight is sort of, or one of the fields of possibility, or what someone you'd call it, like where delight is possible is outside of the known in a way. So the experience of delight to me so often is connected to an experience of surprise, or an experience of being shown something I couldn't imagine. So like when I watched the chipmunks like scale, a 6-foot wall, like, whoa, I didn't know that was possible. Delight, and it was a nice thing too. It's like, oh, that's cool, and so one of the things that I think about delight, the more that I think about it, is that it has a very strong relationship with curiosity and mystery and the unknown. And I kind of feel like that's it. That's sort of, I feel like it's connected to an idea of hope. And it's also maybe something that is, I'm not exactly sure about this, but in a way that feels like hope feels important, but there also feels like this other thing, which is like our capacity to sit in the unknown with each other. And I feel like, which is itself a kind of, there's a kind of present moment, action, I think. And we don't know the result of that, we don't know the result of that, and what I'm sort of, curious about the way that sitting in the unknown, sitting with mystery is sort of what that makes possible in terms of care. I kind of suspect it really sort of foments care, actually. But I'm also, the thing that I realized in writing this book is that the energy of the book, and I noticed it, 2/3 the way through writing it. Oh, part of, because I'd be like, I'd be writing these essays and I'd see a friend and I'd be riding my bike to somewhere and I'd see a friend and I'm like, I'd pull over and I'm like, yo, I gotta read you this, I gotta read you this thing. And partly what I was doing was sharing how flabbergasted I was with someone else. I was like, yo, I didn't know this. Did you know this? And then, so we're kind of holding this thing together. And what was flabbergasting me that I was inclined to share was what I loved. It was what I loved, and I think there's some, like one of the real lessons, and I'm not exactly sure how to connect it to the idea of hope, but there's some ways that it is that the practice of the book, which is a practice that I witness all the time, by the way. We do this all the time. We sort of love something and we're like, yo, you gotta, have you had the ice cream at so-and-so? Or have you, or whatever. Look at that sunset. Or, oh my God, everyone come out. There's two rainbows. It's just like a feature of it's just like who we are, actually. But that's one of the things that I found in the process of writing the book that feels so strong about it, that it was like attention, notice what it is that you love, articulate, and wonder about, why do I love that? I love that thing. Why do I love that? Which you discover a lot about when you think about why you love things, and a very quick segue, I always, regular feature of my classes is that I'll have people go around and say, what do you love? Or I'll say, what do you love that you didn't know you loved, that you learned you loved in the last 2 weeks, but you didn't know? And almost to a one, it's challenging for people to say what they love. They quickly revert to, I liked this and this. And I said, no, what'd you love? To sort of study that and practice loving, practice being in love. And the third part, so anyway, articulating what you love, wondering about why you love it, and then sharing what you love, To me, there's some kind of relationship between that and hope. And I don't know exactly what it is, but I know from my own experience that when I am noticing and wondering about and sharing what I love, my connection, my indebtedness, my love grows, And I'm more able to witness how that happens all the time, I'm more able to study, and I'm more able to get teachers who also have always been showing me this very thing, Share what you love, share what you love, share what you love.
Well, thank you for that, because I think sharing what you love is actually what gives us hope. And if people can develop that ability in themselves, and with your inspiration, hopefully we can be more hopeful, as we deal with all of the stuff that we're dealing with, where it's easy to despair sometimes, right? So that's no small thing.
Yeah.
It's no
Yeah.
small thing. So thank you for that. And with that, I'm going to turn to the Q&A since audience members have been waiting for the opportunity to ask questions. And so I'm going to just go to the Q&A here and look at the first one. It says, you focused on delights when writing almost every day. Did you ever find that you had to write about stuff that wasn't so delightful? If so, did that make you more grateful for your delights?
Yeah, throughout the book, there's much, just the sort of daily thinking about things in a daily life. That's one of the things that's kind of interesting to me about the book 5 years later now, is that I get to sort of witness, oh, I was thinking about, oh, right, that's when I learned that painful thing, or that's when my heart was broken in that particular way, or that's, that was that sorrowful day. If I think there's something interesting about this book, and I stay interested in this book, it's the way that the book is not simply, like you said, it's not like a Jack Handy, it's sort of constantly like, it's real life. It's like there is heartbreak and there is glee, like right next to each other, and sometimes the heartbreak makes the glee more radiant, and that's sort of how it is. So that's a really great question. And, in another way, the answer is like part of the practice of it was to, in the midst of heartbreak, in the midst of sorrow, to still be sort of, and still, I swear to you, a butterfly landed on my nose today. Yeah, it's like, and sometimes we need people to help us with that. We know that we can be, profoundly, just consumed, with our sorrow. And what a gift to have someone be with us in that, but also to be like, hey, just so you know, there's a beautiful song going on right now. There's a beautiful song on right now,
Yeah, thank you. And so the next one has to do with teachers. We thank our teachers like you just did, highlighting their role, what they did that made that difference. Thoughts on teachers, mentors, people who have brought you to where you are as a
Yeah.
writer?
Yeah, I mean, I have so many teachers that I can look back to, and they're, and I find myself, it's interesting, the longer, I've been a professor now for 16, 17 years, maybe. 2005, yeah, 16 years. It's interesting. The older I get and the deeper I think I get into teaching, the more I become aware of like, oh yeah, those teachers when I was, in college or grad school, or when I was like 6, who changed my life, who just cared, expressed care in just a daily but very, precise and sturdy way. I feel like I have so many of them, and the older I get, I realize how many more of them I have than I'm constantly remembering more of them. And, ways that coaches I had have, really, really took care of me, and so many, regular teachers, but then like all kinds of elders who have been in my life, who, if you were to say, were you Ross's teacher, they'd probably not say so, but I'm here to say, yes, they were, and people who were not, like sort of, just, anyway, that's to say, yes, so many people I think of as teachers, and a lot of those people I don't even know, actually, a lot of them I really know, my mother's a great teacher to me, but a lot of them I don't know.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
And here's a question that sort of delves into the literary a bit more. Do you find that dwelling in Keats' negative capability, not reaching for answers, allows you to be more open to moments of being that we can't experience without being fully present with all of our senses?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. That the ability to hold, discrete and possibly, contradictory emotions at the same time. I think it, I mean, I think there's a kind of a way, and I suspect it's good for capitalism. it's good for selling stuff, but I think there's a way that the complexity of our lives tries to be erased, you know. And so the idea being that joy is not entangled with sorrow, and etc. And in a way, they are mutually constitutive experiences because they're experiences that we have, you know, they're not, you know, and furthermore, I think they're actually more tied up than that we just have them together. I think they really inform each other, you know, and in a way, like, I think joy is in fact the ways that we reach toward each other in the midst of our sorrows, you know. I sort of think that is what joy is. And so that even, you know, those things are not, so that so much of what we kind of think of as being contradictory experiences are not actually contradictory. They're completely fabric together. So in a way, I guess, in a certain kind of way, it makes me want to reread that letter of Keats's, because because now I think, oh, maybe I want to tussle a little bit with that, with that idea. Though I love the idea, and I just wrote it I just wrote it to someone in an email, you know, today, thinking about the capacity to hold complicated, you know, and not necessarily lining up things together in our heads, which feels like a, you know, I don't know, like grown in a way. It feels grown, actually. But it also feels like, again, another sort of thing of like the potential of fomenting care for each other. Thank you.
As a historian, I used to tell my students, get comfortable with ambiguity. And now I don't want them to get comfortable with it anymore. I want them to wrestle with it, but same sort of idea that the human experience is vast and contradictory and complicated, and that's the human experience. So, this next question digs into sort of the discipline of writing. Love how you gave yourself a time discipline for your writing. Do you prefer to write in the morning hours or evening? Is there a time of day that you write?
Yeah, I don't have that. I have tried to do that because I've had teachers who have kind of done that. I'm pretty sure I remember one of my teachers and dear friends, Marie Howe, beautiful poet. I'm pretty sure she had, like, I remember hearing her say it was like 8 to 12 every morning, or, you know, and other people who are like, you know, 6 to 12 or 6 to 8, 6 to 10. And I tried that, and it wasn't great. I don't think I did anything better than anything else. I actually think it was sort of more in the discipline thing. I was like, I thought it was real because it sucked. So I kind of have an ebb and flow mode of working, I think, though when I'm writing Delights, I'm writing something every day. Outside of that, I don't necessarily, but when I'm revising, which seems these days to be often, I'm writing all the time, you know, like I kind of woke up in the middle of the night, was writing for 3 or 4 hours, revising. You know, when I hop off of this, I'm kind of in a thing, so I'll get back to it, you know, and then try to go work out in and then get back to it. So it ebbs and flows. I don't have a real steady schedule with it, but it's always neat to know like all the different ways that people do it.
Yeah, thanks. This next question, I'm going to add something to it. Did you experience delights as a child, or only recognize them as you got older? And to that, I would add, what is your daily practice of delight since writing the book? But when did you first realize you were a delighted person?
Yeah, you know, it's funny, you know, because I don't know that I'm sort of inclined that way. And I don't know that I have a proclivity toward, I don't have any special proclivity toward that. I sort of, I've been trying to figure this out, to try to do history on myself in my own way, you know. And while I am like, you know, like I'm a little bit of a melancholic, actually. You know, as a kid, like I always liked the slow song. I always liked the sort of, you know, the more melancholy song, like across the board, what I was listening to. And, but which I'm trying to figure that out, because I was for a little bit like, I don't know, like, what was that? What is that about? I'm still that way. What is that about? But that itself might have something actually to do with the capacity for delight, but I'm not sure. But what I do know is that I don't think I'm especially, built that way. I don't think I'm especially built that way. I don't think I'm especially unbuilt that way either. I want to say that, and which is why, in a certain kind of way, why the idea of the practice is interesting. If I was just always like pumped and like, hey, it would be like, whatever, you don't have to write a book of delights. But I'll say this, my therapist at some point said something along the lines of like, oh, you're a fundamentally distrustful person, something like that. Something like that was pretty tough. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, no wonder I had to write a book of delights, because I'm trying to imagine the world that I want to live in, mm-hmm. Among other things. So I think that actually answers the question as well as anything else I could say.
I see a little hope there too, honestly.
Yeah.
Let me see. The essay Toto is the only one. Speaking of slow songs, Rosanna was sort of mid tempo. The essay Toto is the only one that seems to not have a delight. What should we see as the delight in that lament, as you call it?
I mean, just Toto. The delight to me is that they're. I think, as I recall, there's so many delights to me in that essay. But I love that you're sort of like catching the lament, because it's a lament at the end. The delight is that there was a time when you could be very average looking dudes and be like, and just be like the rock, be rock stars or whatever, yeah, that's how I thought it. Like, I had so much fun being like, oh man, in the 80s, like you weren't also like, didn't have to also, look like a movie star. You could kind of just look like some dude who went to high school with me. You
just have to be a very talented musician.
Got to be talented, yeah.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
Just a comment here. I love the essay about your body, shows such tenderness to oneself. Mm-hmm. And I really liked your essay called Remission, still surprising ending, which is the delight.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's about a beloved who was diagnosed back in the day with 2001 with leukemia, and is doing fine. Yeah.
Good. Well, I think that's all I see in the Q&A. So I'm going to turn it back to Lindsay here in a second, but I really want to thank you again for writing this book, for continuing to write. I'd love to hear what you have more when it comes to delight. I thought, just one little comment yet, I thought about spirituals. And for me, those are a source of delight. They're beautiful, and kind of where you talk about birds sort of messing around in this bunch of branches and things that are sitting in other words, something that's kind of messed up, but there's something really beautiful happening in there. And that spirituals are sort of built on pain and injustice, and yet there's tons of delight in that, right? The coding about hope, right? Hope for not only redemption, but for freedom, and sort of signaling resistance back and forth in something that's very beautiful, but very much juxtaposed with a very painful experience. And I guess, again, as the historian and the one who's maybe inclined to a bit of melancholy myself about our current circumstances, that discipline of and that practice of delight is something that can really sustain us in really troubled times. So thank you so much for that, and for all of this. And with that, I'll turn it back to Lindsay.
Thanks, Maarten. It's great talking with you.
Thank you, Maarten, and thank you, Ross. That was wonderful. It was great to listen in. Thank you to everyone who made this event possible. I hope you enjoyed it at least a little bit, as much as I did. It was great. I can't wait to hear the rest of the tour. I know we'll have multiple stops and multiple conversations, and this was a great way to kick off. Thanks again to our co-host, Salisbury University, our local partners, our moderator, Dr. Maarten Pereboom, and of course, Ross Gay. Be sure to pick up a copy of the Book of Delights essays at your local bookstore or library. And if you could take a few moments to complete our survey to offer feedback, that would be great. There is a link in the chat, and I think we have some drawings if you do fill it out. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.